Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast, where we will explore the cause and effect of just saying yes in your everyday life or in business. I will dig into topics that are not just stimulating, but will challenge you to be better in everything you do. The podcast is based on the simplicity of saying yes to opportunities you might encounter every single day. I'm your host, Jim Riley. Join me in my first series titled Blue Collar Redefined. Welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast. I am here alive and well after my Spartan Ultra Beast 30 miles of racing, 66 obstacles in Squaw Valley, California this last weekend. Had a great time. All the training paid off. 4 months of hard work with my trainer, Jordan, over at Heart Fit in Glendora, California. And I had, like I said, an incredible weekend. I placed second in the men's over 50 age group category, which I was just happy to finish. But to have a podium finish was even better. These were the world championships, and it was surreal, I got to tell you, to run that far, do that many obstacles, and then eventually wind up on the podium. I took 11th overall out of all the people that came from around the world to race the Ultra Beast, and just really proud and happy of the accomplishment. That's the only one I'm going to do, one and done on the Ultra Beast. I'm going to go back to my regular Spartan series of sprints, supers, and beast. Most miles I'll do in the future is 13 miles. My wife did phenomenal. She went in and kicked butt on Sunday in the World Championship Beast race, 13 miles, 30 obstacles, and took a podium first place finish. She just never ceases to amaze me at her strength and endurance and her willpower. And what was interesting, and I think it's a takeaway for everybody listening that is involved with sports, is she wasn't super confident going in, but I knew she did the time training. I've watched her train over the months. We got the runs in, we got the workouts in. And I think she just was lacking a little bit of the mental strength to have the confidence of going out there and winning leading up to the race. But race morning, all of a sudden, everything clicked in, and she hit the starting line and, of course, absolutely crushed it. She beat the competitor by 3 minutes. So very, very proud of her. And I guess what the message in this is, have confidence in your training, especially if you have a professional trainer, or if you're on a training program, maybe you found something online. Have confidence in the training program, because I would imagine that you will see the results if you have the discipline. So we have another exciting show. I'm going to be brief on this intro because I got to admit it's Tuesday late evening. This is when we load up the shows, and I'm still pretty exhausted from the weekend. So I'm going to be light on this intro, but I do have a great guest this week. His name is Matt Balducci. He is speaking to, well, a little bit for everybody. He talks about his 6 S's to exponential business growth, which is sales, structure, systemization, sustainability, scalability, and then sellability. But what's important to know about Matt is he's really kind of speaking to a 30 to 40-year-old audience, people that are transitioning. And I don't think that enough speakers or books pay attention to men and women in their 30s to 40s, because it's kind of a transitionary period in most careers, or they're at the tail end of one thing, getting ready to go into another, or they're really not sure what they're going to do. So I'm thrilled to bring this message to you with Matt, and I hope you can take something away from it. So here we go. Without further adu, this is my interview with Matt Balducci. Well, all right, here we are on another show of the Answer is Yes podcast. We appreciate you tuning in. I have Matt Balducci on the line, and we've been trying to schedule a call, and I've just been following Matt on social media and what he's been doing. I'm really excited about this today. Hey, Matt, I want to welcome you to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Jim. And people probably don't know this, but on Monday we rescheduled. I woke up, my little man brought home the flu from his daycare, and I caught it like a good dad does. So we finally got a backup time, and I'm back healthy, ready to rock.
Good. You kicked the cold. You know, interestingly enough, I have a lot of guests on this show that are in our same boat. They've got little ones at home, and we talk a lot about juggling career lives with kids, and it seems like everybody, when I talk about career life, they're working from home. So it's juggling like, okay, I'm going to run in my office. I got to make a phone call, keep the kids quiet, things like that. I mean, are you working out of your home office? Are you dealing with that or what?
I'm actually in my home office, but we have a 20-month-old right now. My wife works as well. So we we have a really cool daycare that he goes to. And then, like we were talking about before we jumped on, we're in the red zone currently. When this show comes out, we'll have our second kid. We'll have a baby girl coming. So we'll see how. I mean, you have a 2 and a 4-year-old, so we're with the second one coming, it's gonna. Everyone keeps telling me mixed reviews, like it's either super hard, super easy. So I'll tell you. I'll give you kind of an update when this pops out.
Yeah. Well, just double your efforts. We decided to have 2 because we thought, they'll have playmates, but they still want to play with you, mom and dad. It's like, wait a minute, I made a baby for you to play with, and you won't. It's like, yeah. Well.
Oh yeah.
Well, listen, I'm fascinated by your background and what I've read about you and some of the things that you've put up in your social media and across the internet. And I just can't wait to dig into your past and, how you got to where you are today at such a young age. And, I'm going to do what I do with everybody, and that is, can you walk us through the beginnings of, let's say, just out of high school, some of the decisions that you had to make in terms of going to college and maybe some of those early influences. So, if you don't mind, why don't you take us back to when you had to make some of your first career choices or maybe what some of your first jobs were?
Awesome. So I grew up in Chicago, kind of in a blue collar neighborhood. And you and I were talking, Jim, before we hopped on about, kind of the overall podcast. And I got an opportunity to listen to some of your past podcasts, and everyone who's listening should definitely check out. There's some unbelievable guests. That's just crazy. The COO, In-N-Out Burger and very large companies that I'm excited to go check out after I get off with you. But I grew up right above the poverty line. My parents are excellent and unbelievable parents. They were loving and supportive. My dad is a great man, but he just didn't really have financial success due to he had a really, really rough childhood. Like when I tell my story and people are like, "Oh man, Matt, that's awesome where you are at now." It's actually extremely great where my dad ended up getting to, but he was able to kind of teach me some different things. And one of the things that I would say early on that I learned from him was that risk is okay. And here's how I kind of learned it is as I was growing up, and I don't know why my brain would listen to this stuff, but as I grew up as a young boy, my dad would always point out things like, very nonchalantly, like, "Hey, I could have bought that building, but I didn't do it. I didn't say yes to it." Or I could have took this job opportunity, but I didn't because everyone told me not to. It was unsafe or uncertain. And I think that really affected him long-term in terms of regret. And so by listening to that over and over again, I think one of the key components for me was always being willing to take a risk. And sometimes to my detriment as well. Sometimes I took some risks that didn't pay off, but most of my risks, luckily, at the end ended up doing well. So as I went through high school, I got an opportunity to play baseball for the USA organization and play in Europe. And my parents didn't have a lot of money, so I had to go door to door to raise the money to actually pay for my flight and pay for kind of the tournament. And I did that 2 years in a row and got to play in Amsterdam and Italy, and we won a bronze and silver medal. And it was unbelievable. And that was like my first taste of seeing a different perspective, because most of the kids on my team were from really, really wealthy families. Mm-hmm. And there definitely was I guess it was my first time getting introduced to that world. And honestly, luckily for me, I'm very adaptable, but like even the way I dressed and sounded and my vocabulary, there was definitely a stark difference at that age. And it hit me as I left those tournaments and realized, okay, so the world's a little different than where I grew up.
Yeah.
And so then, so it was really cool kind of growing up in that environment. I in my high school, I was actually one of 7 white students in my high school. So I went to a primarily Black and Hispanic school. And honestly, a lot of people would think, whoa, that's weird. But honestly, it was really cool because it allowed for me to be very relatable to pretty much anyone, because I can now talk to I had zero culture shock of any sort of race, gender, or anything in that nature. So it allowed for me to be more likable and easy to relate. So, but as I grew up and kind of went into college, I did do the typical, go to school. And I started my first business at 18, but we were actually talking about this before we jumped on. And I don't know if you knew this about me, but I dropped out of college my junior year, and I ended up getting my degree later on because my wife forced me to. But she basically said, if you want to marry me, you need to get your degree. Her family's very educated. They're unbelievable. But the crazy part for me is the degree really didn't financially do anything for me other than make my wife happy, which I'm happy I did.
Yeah.
Happy wifey, happy lifey. But but I would say that was just kind of initial from my dad, learning that he had all these regrets. Even though they were very nonchalant, they were never like, oh, I regret not doing that. It was just, you can see it in his eyes. I can feel it. And it kind of forced me to become someone who said, you know what, I never want to get to that age and be sitting there going, well, what if I would have done X?
Yeah, sure.
And that was always my kind of philosophy as I went through the next, the last 10 years, 12 years of my life.
Matt, before we get too far along in the latter part of your life, did you have any jobs early on, like in high school, or maybe even jobs as a little one, paper route or anything like that?
Yeah, so I started working at 15, and I used to be the king of. I used to actually like say this as like almost like a cool thing, which now I look back and like, I was probably a horrible employee. But I had somewhere between 10 to 12 jobs before I went to college. In regards to, I worked at Burger King, White Castle, Sports Authority, pretty much any sort of type of. I had to, so I could I had to support myself. I paid my way through school, and I also supported most of my. When I was younger, I paid my cell phone bill. I paid for my car insurance, and kind of your typical bills that I had. And so I've worked. I used to work at my high school as a maintenance guy. I used to clean up the school. A lot of different interesting jobs, but also I remember my first job was like $4 or after taxes. So I don't know why I knew this, but after taxes when I was 15, I knew what I was making, and it used to make me mad because I was making like $4.50 after taxes. I was like, wait a second. Every one of my hours is only worth $4.
Yeah.
and then I would try to get a new job that would pay me an extra 30 cents, 50 cents, $1. And I remember when I got to college, my first job there was working in the cafeteria, and I was making, I think it was like $9, and I was like, thought I was like rich. And then that's when I started my first business. And that's when I realized, wait a second, entrepreneurship is really where you can make more money if you're willing to take the risk and work your tail off. And so I had a ton of jobs before I started my first company.
So you talked about growing up in an area where your classmates were a little bit more affluent. Was that hard on you that you were, A, you're a minority in your school, but B, you're working your tail off for everything that you have? And I can relate. I had to work my tail off to buy my first car and anything I wanted, nice clothes, I had to buy myself even at 15 years old. But how did that make you feel, and how did other students treat you, being that kid that's working your tail off?
So I would say that honestly, I didn't really realize that I didn't realize my parents' financial status until I got to college. College was really when I realized that my mom and dad weren't really making a lot of money. My dad I don't know how he did it, to be honest, but he did a great job of making very little money, but pretty much giving us everything we needed in regards to, I never really felt like we weren't getting what we needed. Other than every now and then, maybe we didn't go on like the nicest vacation, or we still went on tons of vacations, but maybe we didn't like stay at the nicest hotels. But again, when you're a kid, you don't really know the difference.
Yeah.
And my dad did an excellent job. In terms of friends, I actually just didn't really pay attention. And when I look back, I didn't really actually know any different. Every now and then I would go, man, I'm working really hard, but I really actually enjoyed it. And I think it made me who I am today by having to work so hard, because I learned time management at 15, 14 years old, when, kids barely know how to have time. There's adults who have no idea how to manage their time. And I had to, I was working 30, 35 hours a week playing, sports at a high level, and going to school and getting great grades. I had to really understand how to work my schedule the right way to get schoolwork done. And I also learned how to a degree, have people skills to where, to allow me to make friends with my teachers and, find the right people in the class to help me make sure I got my grades. And then when I was at work, doing well enough to keep getting promoted, and then in sports, being able to play. But I didn't really know any different until I got to college. And then I realized, okay, my fraternity brothers don't have to work. They can focus on school and just party all the time. And that's when I started realizing there was a little bit level of difference when they all showed up with laptops and computers and I didn't have one, and I had to work for a month